Yes, welcome to Dr. Martens webinar on how to bring your sustainability idea to life. As already mentioned, my name's Jess and I'm also joined by Jack, and we're both in the sustainability team at Dr. Martens. And our kind of main purpose is to manage the impacts that Dr. Martens has on planet and people as well. So we've got a real life example today that we're going to take you through, as well as some top tips on how to bring sustainability projects into life. But just to kind of set some context, so you may have heard of Dr. Martens. Hopefully you have. We're the #1 boot brand globally. So if you go and ask someone to name a boot brand, they're more than likely to say Dr. Martens. But we don't just make boots, we also make shoes and sandals as well. So we've got that kind of year-round appeal. And we're a fairly old brand in comparison to some others that you might have heard of. The first pair of Dr. Martens were produced in 1960 in Northamptonshire in the UK. And that factory is still up and running. We still operate it to this day, and it's where our Made in England range is made. But the majority of our products are made by suppliers who are based in Asia these days. So me and Jack, we're based in the London office, and Dr. Martens, we've got a kind of global presence. So we also have offices in America and Asia Pacific as well.
Thanks, Jess, for setting that context. And what we're here to share with you today is really, as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, top tips on how to bring your sustainability idea to life. But also we're going to put that within the context of a sustainability idea that we've recently brought to life. But to give some more context, sustainability isn't necessarily new to Dr. Martens. Really, right from the beginning, sustainability was at the heart of the brand in the way that our founders, Dr. Martens and Mr. Funk, brought together the idea of a bouncing sole, and that was originally made from recycling materials. And ever since that point, we've really been developing timeless and durable products to make sure that they can be worn for as long as possible on people's feet. And so ever since then, we've been evolving our ideas all the way to this point, where we take sustainability very seriously. We recently launched a sustainability strategy called Planet, Product, People. And now everything that we do, we try and look at it through the lens of sustainability and try to make sure that we limit our impact on planet and people, as Jess said, as much as we possibly can. But to give you a little bit of an insight into the sustainability idea we're going to talk about today, it's something we launched only a few months ago in March, and it's a product called Genix Napper. And we've got a quick little video on the next slide to give you an idea of what it's all about.
Introducing Genix Napper, our latest material innovation, reclaimed waste leather destined for landfill. Re-engineered to create a lightweight material without compromising on durability. One of the many steps we're taking to tackle waste leather and part of our commitment to lower impact, long-lasting footwear. Reclaimed leather, remade to last.
Great, so that was a brief introduction to our Genix Napper product, and that is, what we'll be kind of weaving throughout our top tips today, and Jack will be talking about that in a second. But to kick things off, so how to bring a sustainability idea to life, that was the kind of brief that we were set. And we've broken it down into kind of 3 different areas. And the first area is to firstly understand your context. And I think a lot of ideas and innovations are kind of sparked from someone realizing a problem, or there's like an issue in the world and they want to solve that issue. So that is mainly and mostly where we kind of start with our ideas for sustainability. And you might have like one perception of what that problem is, but it's really important to kind of go out into a wider circle and ask other people what their perception of that problem is as well, because it's really important to kind of understand everyone's perspectives on that issue. The second point is around breaking down that kind of larger target into smaller, more manageable steps. And this is very relevant to us at the moment because at Dr. Martens, we've recently set a commitment to be net zero by 2040. So this means that we want to reduce our carbon emissions to zero by 2040, which is an absolutely massive task to undertake. And for us, what we've done is we've kind of looked at that kind of long-term end goal and worked backwards at the different steps that we know that we can kick off and kind of make progress towards that. So we've broken it down into more manageable, smaller projects that will help us get to that longer term aim. And that is a really kind of useful ethos to take throughout any project that you're working on, because, you know, you could have an amazing idea that you've kind of realized from that problem you've encountered, but how do you get to that endpoint? Well, breaking it down into manageable steps and taking that first step forward is often the most challenging part, but you know, once you get going, hopefully there'll be no stopping you. And then the third point is finding people who can help you. So, you know, it's really important to get a circle of people around you that can advise you. You're not going to be an expert on everything. So it's important to find those people that are experts in those topics that you might need a little bit more help on. You know, if you're not the best at maths, find a friend who's really good at maths and ask if they want to help you out. If they don't want to be involved, you know, too heavily, that's fine, but you can still go to them for advice.
So there's some really fantastic tips, but to show we're not just all talk, here's how we've actually gone ahead and done that with Genix Napa that we showed in the video earlier. So first of all, it all started with what the problem was that we were trying to solve. And for us, we use a lot of leather in our boots and shoes. And in the process of making leather, there's a lot of waste that can be generated throughout that whole process. And so we looked at all that waste and we thought, this is not something that we want to be associated with. We want to make sure that it doesn't end up going to landfill or incinerated. We want to make sure that that kind of waste is used as a resource and turned into boots and shoes into the future as well. So there was our problem. And we talked to lots of other brands about that as well, because everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of footwear brands use leather because it's a fantastic material for footwear. So everyone's experiencing this same kind of problem around leather waste. Then we had to sit down and decide, what does winning really look like for us in this space? And Jess mentioned that we have our big target of net zero by 2040. So that's what we're really aiming for. But the smaller target along the way around waste is that we want to make sure that we have zero waste going to landfill by 2028. So at this point, we know we've got a problem, we know we've got some waste, and we know that we don't want to let it go to landfill in any scenario. So therefore, we want to find a way in which we can recycle that waste into a new material. Now, Dr. Martens is really good at making shoes, but we're not very good at recycling leather yet. So we had to go out there and talk to people and understand who could help us recycle this leather waste in a material that could be really useful for us. So we found a partner who are based here in the UK, in Peterborough, called Generation Phoenix. And they're a company that specialise in grinding up that leather waste that you saw in the video and turning it into this new Genix Napa material that we're using today.
Great. So the second key point that we want to talk about is making sure that your facts are true. So you've got your problem, you've got your idea, and you've kind of started building up that kind of group of people around you that can help get you to your end point. But in order to go along that journey and communicate your idea, it's so important that what you're talking about is truthful and factual. And the first point in this area is around going and seeing the things for yourself. So this is all around getting stuck in. I know firsthand that there's nothing better than going and visiting a supplier for yourself in order to get a feel for whether that supplier is the right partner for you, whether they're the right fit, and whether everything they've been telling you over email is actually true. If, for example, it's not practical to get there, for whatever reason, you can always ask someone that you trust to go and visit them. And in our case, we do this through audits. So we've got a company that goes and audits some of our suppliers for us. And this is one of the ways that we make sure that our suppliers are kind of keeping their promises and upholding their standards in the day-to-day. The second point is around getting opinions from the experts. So experts are experts for a reason, and there's a lot of experts in the space of sustainability. Even though we work in sustainability, me and Jack, we can't claim, unfortunately, to be experts in everything to do with sustainability. So understanding what those kind of organizations like NGOs or charities, what their kind of current thinking is really important, because sustainability is a very quickly moving space. There's a lot of research going on constantly, and quite often the advice on what the best thing to do is changes week to week sometimes. So yeah, it's really important to keep a finger on the pulse of like what the most recent and best advice is. And there's some examples there that we're kind of connected with. So WWF, they're experts in nature and biodiversity. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they're experts in like waste and resource management. And then Textile Exchange are experts in kind of sustainable materials and the fashion industry as well. So those are some of the examples of outside experts that we get advice from. And then the third point, to make sure your facts are true, testing is so important. And I think any kind of apparel or footwear company would back us up on this point. So we do a lot of testing on our materials and also the products when they're kind of finished in their construction. And we do this to kind of give ourselves the evidence basically on the claims that we're making about our materials and products. So the video you can see there, that's a machine called the Pedatron, and it basically mimics someone walking over and over again, thousands of times, and it tests the strength and durability of the materials and also the construction of the boot. So we do this to give ourselves peace of mind that, when we talk about Dr. Martens being really durable, we know that they are because we've put them through some pretty rigorous testing. And I should also mention that no kind of project or process is, ever without problems. So if a test comes back and it's not the results that you're expecting, it's really important to learn from that, capture whatever those kind of problems were, and then move forward and improve for the next time. And I think Jack is going to talk about that in the context of Genic Snapper.
Yeah, so this is how we did all of those things with Genic Snapper. So the first thing that we did is we went to our partner's factory in Peterborough that I mentioned, Gem Phoenix, and we saw how they created the recycled material for ourselves. And that was really interesting because that not only proved to us that the facts were true and that they could turn waste into a new material and do it in a really effective way, but it was also really inspiring. It gave us ideas as to how we could position this product into the future to our wearers, and gave us ideas around how we can communicate it to the wider world as well. So once we'd gone and seen the product, we then started, or the factory itself, we then started working behind the scenes to really prove that the material was what it says it was. And as Jess mentioned, one of the ways that we can do that is getting opinions from the experts and working with auditors. So we worked with a certification body called the Global Recycled Standard. And what the GRS do is they look at recycled materials and they say, okay, well, this material is definitely made out of for instance, 50% recycled materials, and these materials come from a specific place that they've mapped the materials back to. And that's really important to us, because then that means that we know that A, the material is what people are saying it is, but also B, we know where these materials come from and they're not associated with anything harmful, because we want to make sure that using recycled materials is sustainable as it can be. And then finally, when it came to testing and learning, we still haven't finished really when it comes to this particular product. So when we first started looking at the material, we did the Peloton test that Jess was showing, but we also took the material itself and stretched it and squashed it and really tested all the different properties to make sure that it would stand up to the real world. But you can do all these kind of tests in a lab and it will give you a result, but it's not the same as really putting it on people's feet and testing it in the world. So before we launched the product in March, we worked with people who we call wearer testers, and they put the product on their feet for the first time and gave us feedback constantly all the time on how the product was performing. You know, was it comfortable? Did it look good? Did it smell good? All sorts of different things. But then also in our first launch, we went to market with 5,000 pairs, and that's because, you know, for us that's a relatively small amount, but we're still testing the material. We want as many people to be wearing it as possible to make sure that we get a really good idea that this is a material worth scaling up to millions of pairs into the future, hopefully.
Great. And then the final point on how to bring your sustainability idea to life is around bringing everyone on the journey with you. And this is probably the most important point, because, you know, you might be doing all the points that we talked about earlier, but if you're not, you know, taking everyone on the process with you, and you're not encouraging that behavior change, you know, that's what sustainability is all about at the end of the day. So there's 3 points here that I think are really important. And the first one is to have a clear plan for success. So I think this kind of links to the earlier point around breaking down that longer term goal into more manageable steps, but it's also around acknowledging that no project or process or idea is ever straightforward and linear. There's always going to be challenges that you come up against, and it's really important to learn from those, test and learn, as we mentioned earlier, because without coming up against these challenges, you know, you're not going to improve, and it's probably more important to come up against those things earlier in the process than, you know, further down the line when it could be more of a disaster. So progress over perfection, we always say. It's better to be taking steps forward than to kind of become paralyzed by trying to do everything perfectly right from the off. The second point is around communication, and it's really, really super important to remember to keep communication constant and clear. And I sometimes need to remind myself this. Maybe I'm not the most clear person all the time, but I think this is really important to think about how different people communicate, because not everyone takes in information in the same way. So we do a lot of presentations at DMs quite similar to this one, and I think they work really well because it's kind of ticking off a few different communication styles. You've got the visual learners, which like the pictures on screen and kind of reading information. But then you've also got the kind of audio learners who learn by listening. So by giving this voiceover, you know, that will kind of help certain people take in the information more clearly. And the third point is around bringing people together often. So I think 2 and 3 are really closely linked. It's all around communication styles, and this, you know, I mentioned presentations, but there's other ways that you can communicate. Email, obviously, you can have a group chat, you can have a virtual webinar, you can have a virtual meeting, you can have a in-person meeting. So there's so many different methods of communication that you need to think about, and they'll be most impactful at various points throughout a project. for example, in-person meetings are more often used when there's kind of like a key milestone or like a big decision needs to be made, and it's really important that everyone's kind of in the room and can look each other in the eye when that decision is being agreed upon. And then Jack is going to take us through how this was applied to Gen Snapper.
Yeah, so for Gen Snapper, this was something that we'd done for the first time. So having that clear plan for success was really, really important. And as Jess said, you can map it all out, but it's not always linear. And that's something that we definitely experienced with Gen Snapper. So what was really important to us right from the get-go was to have what we call a new materials development process, which maps out right from identifying the material and identifying it as something that's suitable to go into footwear, all the way through to then designing the product around that material, then for it to go into our supply chain and to our manufacturing partners, for them to build that piece of footwear, then for it to be shipped over to our stores and our distribution centers around the world, so that then it can end up on someone's foot around the world. And that is a very difficult process that involves a lot of different people and a timeline of around about 2 years. So having that mapped out step by step so everyone knows what part of the plan we're on was extremely important. But then to address the next 2 points around communication and bringing people together often together, when we brought a product like Gen Snapper to market, it involves so many different teams from across our organizations to work on things together. So that included us as a sustainability team, but also our design team, our product management team, our supply chain team, our marketing team. All of those different people have different jobs, but they also look at the world differently and they look at the product that you're making differently. So making sure that we're clearly communicating amongst each other was extremely important. And we did that in a couple of different ways. The first thing was that we tried to bring people together as often as possible through different groups that we've got around the business. And for us, it was always virtually, because you can get people into the room, but the reality is we work with teams in the US and we work with teams in Asia as well a lot. So having everyone in that virtual room together so they could hear each other's opinions was really important. And that changed a lot of things during the process, because sometimes one person would say, I've got this fantastic idea, and then someone else would say, yeah, that's a great idea, but actually you have to do it in this way. And that was a really useful process to go through. But then also we have a regular meeting at Dr. Martens, which is called our Sustainability Committee. And that's where we get our leadership team together as well. So including our leaders like our CEO and our COO to look at what we're doing in sustainability and make sure that we're on the right path and that they know what's going on. So we would bring Gen Snapper to that specific meeting once every 2 months so that they would be able to give us the correct steer, make sure the whole business is going in the right direction, and really make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. So on that note, that's how we brought Gen Snapper to market, and that's our top tips on making sure that you bring your idea to life in hopefully a successful way. So at this point, we're happy to take any questions that anyone might have.